It's small wonder we call them the jewels in our crown. Our district's chain of lakes, large and small, have always played a leading role in shaping the special character of this part of the country. It would be hard to overstate the importance of our lakes, not just in terms of being a notable drawcard for tourism, or even simply as assets for recreational use. For most who live here, there's a connection with these bodies of water that goes far deeper even than that. Taken for granted they often may seem to be, but the mere presence of our lakes defines us as a community, provides us with a sense of place. The Daily Post headline of the 1st of February is intended to shock. Even Post readers inured to the complaints about Lake Rotorua's water quality over many decades would be given cause for heightened concern. In the recent past, warning signs at Lake Rotorua's Okawa Bay have become a familiar sight. This summer is different. The whole of the lake appears to be curdling into a giant algal soup. At the very time that many in the Rotorua lakeside communities are preparing their vintage watercraft for what has become the annual celebration of Wooden Boat Day, they're being told their lake is now not fit for bathing and the practice of using the lake to supply drinking water should discontinue. Even at Gisborne Point, at the eastern end of the lake, normally untroubled by water quality problems, residents are now being told that tests show deteriorating figures beyond the worst that could be found in the Waikato River. And from the Rotorua beauty spot of Te Weta Bay, the review carries a residents' report of similar problems. Both local papers are now seeing readers' letters linking the required urgency to fix the lake's problem, no matter how much it costs, with the extra financial burden of Rotorua's airport expansion plan. There are plenty of readers' views on that matter as well, but it's not as simple an issue as some correspondents imagine. Take the District Council's Events Venues Manager Nick Dallimore. He's completing a report on improvement options for the Conference Centre and Civic Theatre. They had big money spent on them back in 1995 to exploit the conference market, and it's paid off.
With the convention and the incentive market here, huge potential. We were really, I could just, we just needed the facilities. We certainly had everything else going for us.
Over the past 8 years, these facilities have hosted more than 80 major international and domestic functions, making an economic impact on Rotorua of $33 million. But there's a problem. The theatre backstage is seriously run down. The conference centre is too small for really big gatherings, and the venerable sports drome, tucked away behind the bathhouse at 37 years old, simply no longer cuts the mustard in terms of the facilities required for a modern sports venue. And yet, an important avenue of thinking behind the rationale for an expanded airport is to be able to service the lucrative conference market.
We needed to go trans-Tasman to get direct flights from Australia, end of story. It was the biggest single inhibitor when we were talking to Australian and Australasian, so they may be New Zealand businesses, but they had a contingent of Australians part of that, to get both the association and corporate business here to Rotorua. Regardless of how we milked the fly into Auckland, hop on a bus really easy, all those sorts of things, and we would go to extreme lengths to try and make that as simple as we possibly could. It was just, human beings have perceptions, and there was just a perception that was a roadblock.
What Nick Dallimore's report bears out is Rotorua's need for a new top-class indoor facility, and the cost for that is certain to have the naysayers reaching for writing paper and keypads. Meanwhile, elsewhere at the District Council, there is plenty of residual ill will over the Regional Council's continued preference for a regional airport at a more central location nearer the coast. And yet it is becoming clear that no solution to Rotorua's lake problem will be found without the two bodies working closely together. At a community level, it all seems to be working, as the Lake Okarika walkway, largely funded by Environment Bay of Plenty, is open to the public. Ironically, a similar EBOP wetland preservation project is underway at Hannah's Bay, right next door to Rotorua's airport. But it's another Hannah's Bay story that captures the attention of the Daily Post. Although it somewhat languishes in the shadow of the iconic bathhouse as a museum, Te Amorangi has a special charm. And so does its centrepiece, the little architectural gem called Dowsland House. Celebrating its 50th anniversary this month brings local historian Don Stafford to talk with one of Te Amorangi's staunchest volunteers, Brian Somerville.
The property was bought by Horace Balfour Dewsland from Duncan Steele in about 1924. We have had people come to us and say they've seen identical houses in Rhodesia, so it's possible that he copied the architecture of what was basically the Dewsland's home country. He was only here in the summer months. In winter he'd either go back to Rhodesia or to California, where his wife, who was Spanish, had large estates. When she died in the early 1930s, Horace Balfour stayed here in Rotorua because he was a very keen man on his croaky and his trout fishing, and he spent the rest of his time here. The house and the rest of the property of some 350 acres were sold to a member of the Hannah family, Major Hannah. He never lived here because he had been badly injured in the war, and he built what we now know as Mannery House at the end of Robinson Avenue.
Water quality issues aside, so far in 2003, Rotorua has been having a good summer. Visitor numbers are up on previous years, and among the attractions are some new businesses based on Rotorua's cultural strengths. Out on Ferry Springs Road, the Mitai family are taking on one of the big local tourism success stories. The Tamaki brothers have gone from strength to strength with their operation on Highway 5 just to the south of the city. Now Wetini Mitai and his team hope to provide some serious competition in the Concert and Hangi Stakes, despite the fact that it's the face of a senior Wetini family member that graces some of Tamaki brothers' buses. For some years, June Grant has run a successful operation close to Whaka Village. From this house, she's been producing much sought-after Maori-themed clothing lines. Now she's opened a shop on a prime Fenton Street site, specialising not only in clothing, but also upmarket Maori-produced artworks.
People would come because they knew they could get really good design Māori clothing or lovely taonga or nice greenstone or whatever.
June's shop is an expression of the change in attitude towards Maori artists, part of a growing world acceptance of Indigenous art for its own beauty and value.
Yep, there was an upsurge, but not only that, I think we were also being nudged from other centres, regions. Taupo was starting to do some Maori cultural things, Bay of Islands, North Auckland. So we sort of had to say, can't be too complacent to say the tourists are going to come here anyway. We had to play our part.
Out at Rotorua Airport, some visitors are arriving with a blast from the past. Echoing sights that hadn't been seen since the airport opened back in the 1960s. The operators of this vintage DC3 are taking advantage of clear summer skies and running tours of the country for the well-heeled, with time to spare for a leisurely look at New Zealand from the sky. The long spell of fine weather is not good news for everyone. The whole of the central North Island is parched. The fire warning pointers have moved further to the right, and access to some of the most popular tourist spots has been barred due to tinder dry conditions. By the middle of February, the soil moisture readings are the lowest for 20 years, and many dairy farms are down to once a day milking. The Rotorua District Council is now asking residents to reduce water consumption. The pumps at its reservoirs are struggling to meet the daily demand.
There were some major issues with young people. Police were saying, well, we haven't got the resources, and we knew that they weren't being funded appropriately.
Still demanding answers is Charles Sturt, as tourist crime seems to be reaching plague proportions.
He had his own business, a shop in town called Buy-in Dairy, I think so. And they used to meet a lot of people walking traffic, and they saw a lot by being daily in the business of the CBD.
Motel rooms are the latest target for robberies, and in the space of 10 days, 36 vehicles have been broken into. There are fresh concerns about the impact on local tourism of continuing adverse publicity when the year has made such a promising start. Over the years, the city has spent some big money fighting crime, with closed-circuit television cameras covering known hotspots. As a community meeting is called to examine the problem, a Daily Post editorial suggests a fresh approach in finding solutions. Lockwood, one of Rotorua's largest business concerns, needs to expand. For 4 years, the company has been scoping the district for a suitable site. Last year, there was an enthusiastic reception from the residents of Mamaku to the news that 22 hectares of land alongside Highway 5 had been selected for a new $10 million industrial complex. Now the company is going down the road of resource consent hearings, and it's a rocky ride. There are some in Mamaku who feel that the quiet rural lifestyle will be seriously affected. Tourist interests are complaining that the Mamaku site will spoil the quality of a major tourism route in and out of Rotorua. Lockwood point out their plan B could well be to shift their whole operation out of Rotorua, even out of New Zealand. No stranger to lurid headlines, the Daily Post again captures readers' attention with this headline at the end of February. Details of this incident are sketchy but better documented as the case of a student member of Waikato University's research group who has become ill through contact with Okawa Bay's water. From the Rotorua Review, there are reports that property values around Rotoiti are in decline and local businesses are suffering. Perhaps the well-oiled PR machine run by the mob, the Moorea Okawa Bay Action Group, have gone too far.
We got half a dozen or 10 people from around the bay here, and we met here in this house, and we sat there and we said, what are we going to do about it? We're just not getting much progress from council. What are we going to do about it? And one of us said, I remember a comment, if we go public on this and start yelling and screaming, we have the potential to affect property values. Are we prepared to do that? And there was a bit of discussion and another cup of coffee, and I don't know what we tipped in it, but and we decided, yes, we were prepared to take the short-term pain for the long-term gain.
But the strongest public reaction is evoked by these photos claimed to be of stock fouling the lake edge and along the Ohau Channel. A strongly worded headline points the finger at errant local farmers. The Post receives a fresh tide of readers' letters and in response demands urgent action.